Side. Let's get that bigger. Chapbook is a small collection of poetry, generally no more than 40 pages, that often centers on a specific theme, such as exotic foods or wild animals. Or Justin Bieber, it's typically saddle-stitched like a pamphlet or magazine. Format is suited to smaller print runs. So this book I have, the Maurice Crane Academic Overture, which is not that long, has a small print run, is on the theme of academia and being a professor, is a chapbook, essentially. Is that roughly correct? Yeah, it's poetry. Yeah, it's all poetry. I understand. This makes sense. Okay, first thing in our little process of analysis is, just reading, no writing, as we do, right? All-American Game Show. Canned laughter rings in my ears. Cyclical rhetoric. Spinning. The wheel spins, landing on bankrupt. While contestants cry with joy, they claim it says they won. Who am I to argue? Canned laughter rings in my ears, always the same. What am I hearing? Outliers or patriots? Exceptions or exclusives? People scream the rules are wrong. People scream the game is rigged. People are screaming. The host heckled by an audience who've never played the game. The laughter spills out into the streets, rabid contestants out for blood. Discord merges with identity. I look out to my studio, my home. Where am I? Echo chambers for sale, with every flavor of laughter you could possibly believe in. People all too giddy to lock themselves inside, keys held by those who sell chambers. I find myself inside, clamoring to escape my own beliefs repeated 100 times, the laughter in my ears all I hear, everything I want to hear. It's better than the screams. But it's wrong. It's wrong. Doesn't matter. I am content. Maybe I am content. I am content. I am safe from their opinions. I am surrounded by those who agree, the right ones. Perfect parts of an unmarred chain. I feel content. This is what I wanted. Is this what I wanted? Questions blissfully unanswered. Sweet music to my ears, molding my mind into marvelous mush. Tune out the hate. Tune out the love. Tune out forever. Thanks for playing. All-American Game Show by Zone. I can write. Zone of Zones. Excellent. You said you're new to poetry. And this is a wonderful start. An incredible start. I think it's awesome. Let's read it again a second time, now that I'm not going into it blind, as we do. Canned laughter rings in my ears. Oh, I can't start like that. Canned laughter rings in my ears, cyclical rhetoric spinning, the wheel spins, landing on bankrupt. While contestants cry with joy, they claim it says they won. Who am I to argue? Canned laughter rings in my ears, always the same. What am I hearing? Outliers or patriots? Exceptions or exclusives? People scream the rules are wrong. People scream the game is rigged. People are screaming. The host heckled by an audience who've never played the game. The laughter spills out into the streets. Rabid contestants out for blood. Discord merges with identity. I look out to my studio, my home. Where am I? Echo chambers for sale, with every flavor of laughter you could possibly believe in. People all too giddy to lock themselves inside, keys held by those who sell chambers. I find myself inside, clamoring to escape my own beliefs. Repeated 100 times, the laughter. Sorry. Yawn. The laughter in my ears, all I hear. Everything I want to hear. It's better than the screams, but it's wrong. It's wrong. Doesn't matter. I am content. I am safe from their opinions. I am surrounded by those who agree, the right ones. Perfect parts of an unmarred chain. I feel content. This is what I wanted. Is this what I wanted? Questions, blissfully unanswered, sweet music in my ears, molding my mind into marvelous mush. Tune out the hate, tune out the love, tune out forever. Thanks for playing. Yeah, snaps from me. This is excellent. So, political poems. Not usually my style. Not always my jam. But this is lovely, I must say. So, I'm going to start with my, things that stick out. Things that raise questions. And things that I would like to critique. I said this last stream, and I said this on Discord earlier today, I think. Always be critiquing. Even if you are reading someone who is really good, or a work that is considered a masterpiece. If I am reading Shakespeare, or I am reading, let's say, Neruda, or I am reading Bukowski, or I am reading any of that stuff. Be critiquing. I should be critiquing. You should be critiquing. should always be a color in your toolbox, because this is how you learn, by looking at other stuff and saying, you know, these are the things I don't like, these are what I think could be improved, because that is how you understand what you value in a poem. This also means when you get critique, you can understand where that person is coming from, that it is a discussion of what they value. When you start to critique, you'll realize the feeling of giving critique, and then you can empathize with your critics and understand where they're coming from. So sorry to have to leave, off to bed. Love this stream as always, and have a good one, everyone. Arson, Asher, have a good one. Always a pleasure to have you in chat, and have a good sleep. And it is important to rest and take care of yourself, so I'm very happy that that is what you are doing. So we can also do just green for things we like. We're allowed to just like things. So just going through. Landing on bankrupt while contestants cry with joy immediately stuck out to me as just a freaking beautiful line. And then if there's anything chat as I go along that you think fits into one of these categories for you, or something else, or comments, feel free. I'm sure Zone of Zones would appreciate your feedback as well. They claim it says they won. Who am I to argue? Canned laughter rings in my ears. Always the same. What am I hearing? Outliers or patriots? Exceptions or exclusives? People scream, the rules are wrong. People scream, the game is rigged. People are screaming, the host, heckled by an audience who've never played the game. The laughter spills out onto the streets. Rabid contestants out for blood. Discord merges with identity. I look out to my studio, my home. Where am I? Echo chambers for sale. With every flavor of laughter you could possibly believe in, people all too giddy to lock themselves inside. Keys held by those who sell the chambers. I find myself inside, clamoring to escape my own beliefs, repeated 100 times. It's supposed to be green. I like that line. The laughter in my ears, all I hear, everything I want to hear. It's better than the screams, but it's wrong. It's wrong. Doesn't matter, I am content. I am safe from their opinions. I'm surrounded by those who agree. The right ones. Perfect parts of an unmarred chain. I feel content. This is what I wanted. Is this what I wanted? Sweet questions blissfully unanswered. Sweet music in my ears. Molding my mind into marvelous mush. Oh, such good alliteration here. Sometimes alliteration doesn't sound good, and sometimes it sounds really good. And these go well together. Molding my mind into marvelous mush. So good. Tune out the hate. Tune out the love. Tune out forever. Thanks for playing. So, I am going to start. Let's try a new way of analyzing. Let's talk about themes. Or metaphor. These are different. These are completely different things, but I'm putting them together, and you'll see. Before analysis, we've talked about tension. It's written here somewhere. It actually was in Bukowski that I talked about it. We talked about tension. We've talked about... Honestly, sometimes it's hard to... we talked about thesis and illusion pending. And these sound like big academic words, but I do my best to keep them understandable because I think academic language and the language of institutions pretty much exists to just keep people out and make it harder for certain people to understand things. And I would never want to do that. Right. So, that being said, let's talk about themes. You hear this a lot in class. What's the theme of the poem? What is this talking about? And you're like, oh my gosh, I know what it's about. It's about love. It's about, the way society controls us. It's about, this person's queer identity, if we're talking about one of my poems. It's about politics. It's about whatever, right? It's a pretty easy thing to identify. Like, what is this poem about? Sometimes it's hard. It was hard with illusion pending. That's why we were talking so much about it. But also, the broader theme is usually supported by the metaphors you use, right? And these are on a more sort of small scale level, and those are going to add up to make, these are going to culminate in, that was wrong. They're going to culminate, they're going to sum up to your theme, right? Like a pyramid. We have a bunch of little individual metaphors, or just words. Those are going to make meanings to larger sections, which is maybe going to tell a narrative sometimes, but really what it's going to lead to is the overall meaning, right? And I think that's what I'm going to try to do analyzing this one. Because I think you have this really powerful metaphor throughout of the game show. And you use it very well in some places, and there's some places that maybe I wish you would use it more or use it differently. And that's what we're going to talk about, pretty much, right? So, this first stanza is freaking awesome. Canned laughter rings in my ears, cyclical rhetoric, spinning, spinning, the wheel spins, landing on bankrupt. While contestants cry with joy, they claim it says they won. Who am I to argue? So, I mean, every single line here is supporting the idea of the game show, which is good. Setting the theme of the poem, all of that. And I think particularly like the spinning line is awesome because, this idea of the wheel spinning and it's like click, 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 click. And the way that this paces your poem like a game show, we have this suspense, right? And then it lands on bankrupt, which is really interesting because that's, a complete sort of subversion of what we are expecting. Things land on jackpot or 100 or a number, right? Whatever, right? And you put bankrupt, which is like brilliant, I think. While contestants cry with joy, they claim it says they won. Who am I to argue? And I think this is cool because there's multiple meanings here. We can say that bankrupt, it's landing on bankrupt because they literally lost. They literally didn't get the money. Or, And then that speaks to them being delusional and acting and playing a part for the game show. And just sort of putting their head down in this sort of societal way. Now, we can also say this doesn't say bankrupt, literally. We can say bankrupt itself is metaphorical. Maybe they did win money. They won. Which is why they would be crying with joy. But the truly bankrupt part is this sort of bankruptedness of fulfillment or joy or actual, like, anything real. You know, again, they're on a game show. They're on this simulation. They are crying with joy over money, which this poem seems, pretty anti, American consumer capitalism, as I think most poems should be. And so I think, you're already giving ways for multiple interpretations, both of which are, like, really kind of sad. And I think that's awesome. It's good. Like, I think the level of specificity here is good. There's a word, which we haven't really mentioned on stream. Specificity. Although I've maybe sort of implied some of these ideas, talking about length and what I think about specific. It's super wrong. Talking about length and what different poems actually end up conveying. Because it's this spectrum where if you are super specific... Hey, let's do this as another graph. And we can actually do, like, some amount of negative here. So, x-axis being how specific we get, y-axis being the number of possible interpretations, right? If we are doing lines, even though these mean nothing, unlabeled lines for scale. That kind of is a banger line for a poem. This is why you always have a notebook for ideas. So if you have a good idea, you can write down, quote, unlabeled lines. You can even say graph for scale. So what I recommend, have a notebook, have a piece of paper, have something always within arm's reach, in case you have an idea. You also can all steal that if you would like. Regardless, if we are very unspecific, there's a good chance we can get a lot more different interpretations because we are vague. As we get more specific and we clarify, with more specification. Sometimes this means lengthening the poem, but it generally means you're giving people less flexibility to interpret things themselves, right? And this is kind of an important idea. Sometimes you want this, sometimes this is good, and we want our one interpretation to come through in our writing. Ginny, I was zoned out. Why are we doing a graph? And we're talking about chapbooks. Yeah, I mean, I presume chapbooks were probably something that used to be, or like started a long time ago, and I guess your average non-poet is not buying poetry chapbooks, but this one came from like 1970 something. I got it used. Why are we doing a graph? This is the graph of poetic specificity, or literary specificity, where the more specific we get, sometimes there's less interpretation. We're going to have this get down super low, right? Approaching 0, which is interesting if we were being mathematical. So, super specific a lot of stuff, right? And that's okay. This is great for one option, nonfiction, or storytelling. And sometimes a poem does different amounts of this in different places, but this is because we want people to know what we're talking about. Fairly simple. If we have less specificity, things get vague. There are more ways people will interpret, and this can be good and this can be bad. In poetry, I think this is usually good. Right, this is also good too. But it just means it can be dangerous. Sometimes people's works are not specific enough. They're taken wildly out of context and seen as saying something they are not. Happens sometimes with satire. If it's not specified as satire, people will say like, oh look, this is real. Right? If you're not specific at all, maybe there's like a hole in the graph, because if there's no specificity, you're probably like not actually writing. I think there's probably a world of negative specificity where the graph maybe like splits and is either here or here. But that's talking about super vague, abstract, nonsensical work. But so this is an important thing to consider in our works. Like Nico said, dang, I am super specific with a lot of my stuff. And that's okay. I'm often super unspecific with a lot of my stuff. Sometimes I'm maybe negative specific with my stuff. And all of that works. It's just a poetic choice we have to consider. Consider the following, right? This is something we should be thinking about. And all of that is to say, I like the degree of specificity here. We are clearly talking about a game show. We also are probably clearly talking about it metaphorically. And maybe literally. Maybe bankrupt means something literal, maybe it doesn't, right? I think this is a great place for a poem to be landing, especially at the start. It's a good sign for your writing, right? Canned laughter rings in my ears. Always the same. What am I hearing? Outliers or patriots? Exceptions or exclusives? People scream the rules are wrong. People scream the game is rigged. People are screaming the host heckled by an audience who've never played the game. Like this. And the last line is maybe something where specificity gets interesting. Heckled by an audience who've never played the game. To me, of course they're playing. I think, right, we're talking about All-American Game Show, we're talking about echo chambers, we're talking about life, we're talking about our experience in a digital modern consumer age. We're all playing the game. And that's why I'm hesitant over this line. And maybe the game is a little more nuanced and I just haven't hashed that out yet. But to me, this said, this read to me as sort of saying that some people how do I explain this? People scream the rules are wrong. People scream the game is rigged. People are screaming the host heckled by an audience who've never played the game. I think maybe this is trying to say they don't understand the game. People are heckling and screaming and crying out that the world sucks and they don't get why. But they are playing, and they are thus suffering from the game, and honestly, they're screaming about the rules being wrong. Maybe what gets me most is this is directly caused by the fact that they're playing the game. The game show being life, echo chamber, toxicity, the world, the news rage machine, all of this stuff. The general, things that make life in America kind of difficult sometimes. However, people scream the rules are wrong. People scream the game is rigged. People are screaming, the host heckled by an audience. I think that's awesome. People do this. They say the rules are wrong. They say the game is rigged. And it's true. A lot of people don't understand why, or they think they understand why, and they are probably wrong and misinformed, and that probably has something to do with this, right? And I think that's where you're going. But specificity is a dangerous thing, is all I'll say. And you might be implying something that could be misinterpreted, and that is that these people should know better and that it's their fault. And I see these people screaming that the rules are wrong as similar victims of the game, right? Canned laughter rings in my ears, always the same. What am I hearing? Outliers or patriots? Exceptions or exclusives? This line's interesting. It obviously, the words fit thematically. Exclusives, the idea of, limited time. This is something you sometimes see in a game show, pushing people to make decisions. Patriots is an interesting word because it doesn't immediately connect to the game show idea. It connects, it's a very commonly used word in American politics. So it thematically fits. Right. Sort of. But it also actually doesn't quite contribute to your metaphor, which maybe also undermines the meaning. Outliers or patriots, exceptions or exclusives. Now there is one thing to say. Maybe future stream idea, go on r/shitty poetry. That could be fun. I would end up going in there and taking seriously all the shitty poetry. There is something I do like about this. This says, right, outliers are patriots. These are people. If we're calling some people in this country patriots, then others would be outliers. These do seem sort of opposed to each other. Exceptions or exclusives. Also, a difference that's sort of... Right, an exception is something that we're allowing. An exclusive is sort of something we're taking. So in a sense, this is saying no matter who you are, right, you're part of the canned laughter, and you are screaming all the same into a game, blaming a host, when you have no idea the game you're playing. So I like this a lot. It just took a second, and I don't know. Maybe there's just another word choice. Usually my thing is, if I'm reading and something makes me stumble too long, it means there's probably a way to say it. Because even though I encourage people and I want people to analyze my poetry on this level, not everyone's going to read your poem like I'm going to read your poem, and might just sort of get confused as to why you're suddenly talking about patriots, because outliers also isn't an immediately obvious opposite of patriots, right? I think this is basically trying to say, like, left or right, sort of like rich or poor, whoever, you're part of the game, and you don't realize it, which is a great message in this stanza. And I also, so I'm being like super nitpicky here. The overall message comes through, right? We're part of this game show and we're not really doing anything to stop it, and we're screaming in the wrong places. However, this is a political poem, and I usually shy away from political poems because they're really hard to write, and you do a great job here, and there's a lot of room for nuanced misinterpretations. And so I guess what I'm saying is, if you're writing a political poem, really dig in and do this to your own work. Because writing about politics is a serious thing that can change people's minds and be misinterpreted, change people's minds in a way you don't expect. And if we believe in the power of our art, which I think we should, then we want to be careful when we're talking about politics and current events. Really good though. See, I have a lot more green here than red, right? And purple. The laughter spills out onto the streets. Rabid contestants out for blood. Discord merges with identity. I look out to my studio, my home. This is great. You know, that the home is the studio. You know, the film studio or the set. This almost gives a feeling of like Truman Show, which I need to watch. I haven't seen it. But just this idea that our lives, even when we are at home, are consumed by the game show. And then we ask, where am I? Because it's stopping feeling like a home. Also, something I want to highlight throughout is your use of senses and imagery is so good. You have laughter, so you have sound. You have it spilling out. It makes it feel tactile and tangible, which is excellent. You have flavors of this laughter. You have, again, hearing. You have sweet music in my ears. And then also just some very nice, like, specific imagery, visual imagery of stuff like the echo chambers for sale, the keys, the clamor for escape, all this stuff. I think those are like really great uses of some of the five senses. We don't have taste, we don't have smell, and that's okay. You know, it's sort of something that gets talked about a lot in writing, is the five senses. And if you want to really capture a person's mind, you engage all five. You say that you have the different, you do have taste. You have the flavors of laughter. You have the way it looks as it spills onto the street. You have the way it feels, right, which is almost like being trapped in the chamber. But you could also talk about more ways that you have the touch of the laughter. What are the other ones? That's sight, that's taste. Smell. What does the laughter smell like? You know, it probably, proprioception. And it, what does it smell like? Is it caustic? Is it sweet while you're in that echo chamber? right? And then obviously we're talking about a sound. So yeah, proprioception. Proprioceptive sense. I invite you all to close your eyes. Is what you'll do first. Proprioception. Close your eyes. And hold your hands out in front of you. I'm doing it. And take your 2 index fingers and bring them together. How did you do that? You can't see your hands. Proprioception is feeling where you are. It's the sense of one's place and like physical, sensing your own self. So, if you want to understand proprioception, you just close your eyes, put your hands together, and you're like, wait, I feel roughly that these are kind of close together. Now I feel that they're kind of far, and I can bring the tips of my fingers together, usually if I have a decent proprioceptive sense, right? It's a very cool one. And actually there's probably a way that you could use proprioception in this, and I think that's cool. 5 senses come from Aristotle, but we have far more. Sense of balance. Yeah, it depends. Some people start and stop at various places. You might say balance is proprioception. I'm happy with 5 plus proprioception, but maybe you can convince me that there's more. Stylish fail. But it's true, talking about balance in this poem, the way that the laughter perhaps would make you stumble, that is a very powerful sensory idea. Stumbling is out of control. And maybe you're even stumbling into this echo chamber. Sense of hunger? Yo, you're so right. Jeez, okay. Sense of hunger, which can also be thirst. Pain. I have interesting ideas on pain. Sometimes I think that pain is a reaction to sensory experience. Hunger could also be considered a very mild pain. Because pain can come from touch, and pain can come from sound, and pain can come from sight. So it's interesting, right? Pain is more a quality, maybe, of a sense. But there's lots of different ways to describe it, and I don't think it would be wrong to say pain is a sense. I've thought a lot about myself and my relation to my sensory apparatus. Temperature. Harper, come here. You don't need to bark. Come here. Harper, come. No, don't whine. If you want to leave, I'm not going to let you come back in, because, you opening and closing the door is like an interruption to my analysis. Okay, he's going to be back in like 5 minutes, and I'm going to let him in because I love him. So, yeah. Where am I? Echo chambers for sale, with every flavor of laughter you could possibly believe in. I like this. I don't know why. I like believe there, though. People are all too giddy to lock themselves inside. Keys held by those who sell chambers. So, this is maybe another line I'm less keen on. It's mostly personally, I see a lot of our relation to technology and echo chambers in this as one of victimhood. And once you are there, or once you go there, it is not necessarily your fault. And this is my personal, at this point, political and sort of philosophical disagreement. But to an extent, it is consistent, right? So your message is consistent. And this is good, right? You don't see these people as victims as much as you see them as, at least as the poem says, sort of blind to this. Sort of the idea of like sheep. And I just have a different sort of moral stance on it, and that's okay. Keys held by those who sell chambers. It's a good line. It sounds poignant. But again, we're getting political, and I'm going to talk about my opinions. And to me, I think it's honestly sort of out of anyone's hands. The keys of the chamber are maybe held by the people who make it up. And you do talk about a chain later. Parts of an unmarred chain, this freedom to say, since we're all acting in the same way. It feels more like that. And we have chained ourselves to each other in these spaces, and that's maybe the dangerous part. Of course, the people who make the chambers, the people who make the platforms in which they can exist, sort of do, but do they hold the keys anymore? Maybe, maybe not. I don't normally spend as much time digging into people's meaning and what I think about it, but again, politics. So, I kind of have to. I find myself inside, clamoring to escape my own beliefs, repeated 100 times. This is an awesome line. That, the realization that once our beliefs are the only thing, it becomes wrong. Like, your acknowledgement of this is awesome, right? I think the fact that this poem is being written says you understand a lot more about this than many people. And it's good. And then again, we talk about the laughter, all you hear being sort of drowned out, everything you want to hear. And this is like that beautiful contradiction that makes it so hard to break out. And I think you pinpoint this beautifully, because people get to hear what they want. They hear what they want, and then the difficult thing is realizing that hearing what I want, which is comfortable and safe and enjoyable, can also be wrong. This involves a great degree of introspection and reflection, right? Because it's really hard to get yourself out of this cage. Doesn't matter. I am content. I am safe from their opinions. I'm surrounded by those who agree. The right ones, perfect parts of an unmarred chain. I feel content. Is this what I wanted? No, this is what I wanted. Is this what I wanted? And I think this is a wonderful counterpart to the last stanza. I don't exactly remember why I put the big red bracket here of criticism. Maybe it's because I was really excited when I first read this as I am content, because I am a Twitch streamer and I'm literally turning my life into content, and in a sense I'm probably in some sense holding these keys, right? Which is absolutely terrifying, and we get scared of those things. So I really liked that the poem originally, when I read it as content, as in Twitch, I was like, whoa, that's awesome. I was like, oh, it's content. But like that's okay too. It is still a really like good line. That being said, if you tied in the idea of content too, that'd be super cool. I think it's because they're so like diametrically opposed, content and content. I don't think we are ever going to be content if we're just consuming content. This was something we talked about in illusion pending with our graph of creation and consumption, right? And their relation. So maybe I was just sad there's a brilliant wordplay that is unused here. So I'd totally encourage you to do that if that sounds cool to you. Obviously, I'm the one who that directly relates to, so that's kind of your choice. Questions blissfully unanswered. Sweet music in my ears, molding my mind to marvelous mush. This is nice. I think this is really tasty to my ears, and in a sense it almost feels like trance-like, molding my mind to marvelous mush, right? The words literally have a quality that feels kind of like the poem. It feels like this trance, which is awesome. So maybe you could do it more, or you could leave it as such, but I only say you could do it more because I think it works so well, right? Tune out the hate, tune out the love, tune out forever. Thanks for playing. And we get very grim at the end, as we should, and thanks for playing. So, okay, I remember why I was slightly critical of this. We do this shift after this line, halfway in the poem. That's something we talked about with Nico the other day, actually, is how things relate, where we start really specifically talking about the game show, and then we mostly end up talking about echo chambers. And there's a very clear connection to the game show that we're playing, sort of being part of this facade, this fake existence. And I think maybe you could do more in like this stanza, and even this stanza. We do talk about like repeated 100 times. That feels like the canned laughter. Like the association is very strongly there. And you do close with thanks for playing. But I feel like this could do more to tie back into your overall like thematic material, because the poem is called All American Game Show. And I read this and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read a poem on the theme of game show, probably as a metaphor for American life. So why not keep it up? This is something that I do a lot in my poems, honestly, where we'll start with a title. It will like really strongly have this idea of, whatever we're talking about, and then it kind of starts to slip into some other metaphors, and then we're like, oh, now we're way over here at sort of a different color, and then, but we need to wrap up, and we remember that the poem is kind of called whatever, so then we kind of put it back together at the end. That doesn't make the whole poem bad, right? These are still really strong metaphors that are insightful and brilliant and beautiful. It just makes the poem feel slightly unfocused, right? And if you just replace, because it is good to explore new metaphors, but hey Jane, gonna leave a lurk. Thanks for tuning in. glad you're here. Jane is an awesome streamer. If you just include little bits of your original thematic material throughout these new metaphors, this is really going to make the whole poem feel cohesive, and then just have it really click. It already clicks. You heard me on my first read. I was like, oh man, that's good. I was snapping. This poem is already excellent on first impression. And if you turn it into a poem, if you feel like editing, into a poem that gets better every time it's read, so instead of sort of starting to get fuzzy and lose some focus, then I would say at that point, I have no complaints. Like, this is already a really strong poem, and I'm being really critical because it's political, and we have to be with political work. We have to be careful with political work. Political work is powerful, and you do it well. I just think there's a few little things you can adjust. So that being said, zone of zones, right? Do you have anything else you want me to dig into? Any clarification on what I said? Any further comments before I give it a last read? If you're still around, I hope you're still around. Stylish Fail said something. What's the saying? Tune in, drop out, something. Hippie saying. I honestly have no idea. You're the boomer, Stylish Fail. I'm a young person who doesn't know. First of all, thanks so much for the analysis. Thank you, Zone of Zones, for submitting it. You know, I say it every time, so maybe it feels a little canned, but I mean it. Your work, all of you, your work is incredible. It's such a joy to read. I learn every time. I read one of your poems. And this is helping me clarify some of the things that, I got taught in high school and didn't listen to. Like, why do we talk about themes? Why do we talk about specificity and all these things? And it's because of you all that I'm also able to have a more nuanced analysis for the next person. So you're all sort of in early to the party. So, and yeah, I can see how my metaphor got away from me. I'll do some editing and see if I can hone in on what you're trying to say more clearly. Yeah, and I mean, it gets away from you only a little bit. Just a little bit. This is a poem that you could go perform or show to people or share, and I think you would get great positive reception. But yeah, a poem is never going to be perfect, and you might like it this way. My word is not law. I speak with a lot of conviction, but I don't know. Maybe that's because I'm selling you on my echo chamber. Don't leave. It was a joke. But again, these are just ideas of me, and it's your poem. But yeah, I'm glad you shared it. You do have to go now, but thanks again so much. You'll be back later if you can. Okay, I'm gonna give it one more read if you want to stick around, and then it'll be up on YouTube later. As you said, you're okay with that. Unless you change your mind, that's okay. So, All-American Game Show. Canned laughter rings in my ears. Cyclical rhetoric spinning. The wheel spins. Landing on bankrupt. While contestants cry with joy, they claim it says they won. Who am I to argue? Canned laughter rings in my ears, always the same. What am I hearing? Outliers or patriots, exceptions or exclusives? People scream the rules are wrong. People scream the game is rigged. People are screaming. The host heckled by an audience who've never played the game. The laughter spills out onto the streets. Rabid contestants out for blood. Discord merges with identity. I look out to my studio, my home. Where am I? Echo chambers for sale. With every flavor of laughter you could possibly believe in. People all too giddy to lock themselves inside, keys held by those who sell chambers. I find myself inside, clamoring for escape, my own beliefs repeated 100 times. The laughter in my ears, all I hear, everything I want to hear. It's better than the screams, but it's wrong. It's wrong. Doesn't matter. I am content. I am safe from their opinions. I am surrounded by those who agree, the right ones. Perfect parts of an unmarred chain. I feel content. This is what I wanted. Is this what I wanted? Questions blissfully unanswered. Sweet music in my ears, molding my mind into marvelous mush. Tune out the hate. Tune out the love. Tune out forever. Thanks for playing. All-American Game Show by Zone of Zones. I think you already left, but thank you so much for submitting. I appreciate it. Wonderful, wonderful poem. Very powerful. And I hope my critique, my advice, my analysis was insightful, helpful,